in cities, and I believe there's one that's sort of trying to be built or grow here in Delaware. And as somebody who honestly, I spoke at the first Wilmington Tax Day Tea Party. I spoke at the second Wilmington Tax Day Tea Party. I spoke at the third Wilmington Tax Day Tea Party. And I don't consider myself really a Tea Partier per se, but I do consider myself a big supporter of individual liberty. And I've said it on this show many times, and I said it at those events, that the best person to take care of me is me. But I do need two things to do that, and one of which is education, and the other of which is opportunity, job opportunity, opportunity to grow a business, whatever that opportunity is. And what we've done in this country over the last decade or so, well, first of all, education, we stopped improving education a decade or more, 2 decades, 3 decades ago. It's been a long time that educational achievement has basically flatlined in the United States. And so that's a failure of government, which provides the vast majority of educational support and assistance, which is why I'm such a strong advocate and have worked so hard within the charter school arena to try to create that entrepreneurial cauldron, if you will, to where good ideas can be made and then spread out. And we've had some great successes in the charter school movement. We've had some abysmal failures, but that's the whole point. But when it comes to jobs and opportunities, we have over the last 20 years, frankly, let jobs and job opportunities and economic competitiveness fritter away in this country. And the Tea Party, one of the central tenets of that was, we want more freedom from government. We want the ability to do what we want to do within respect for others, within the guidelines of law and diversity and all that kind of stuff, which is important. But if you look at protests in America, starting with the Revolution, what was the Revolution? The Revolution was a battle for something. Taxation without representation. What we wanted was representation, either in the British Parliament or we wanted to represent ourselves for ourselves. It was a battle with a positive message. We want liberty. You look at the Civil Rights Movement. It was a protest for something. It was for equality. Here's a group of citizens, African Americans, other minorities, who were not treated the same and should be. They should have the same rights as everyone else. It was a battle for something. The Vietnam protest, on the flip side, was a battle against something. It was against the war, which, certainly there were lots of reasons to argue against that war, and I agree with a large number of them. But it ultimately was not successful in ending the war. What ultimately was successful in ending the war was the Nixon administration sort of negotiated a long-term fritter out. But it really had it had less to do with the protests than it had to do with, honestly, a poorly implemented war and the lack of American support when 50,000 Americans were dead and we had nothing to show for it. My fear with the Occupy Wall Street movement is that it needs to be for something. And I hope that the leaders involved, the AFL-CIO, and some of the unions that have a big stake in it at this point in time, can turn that into, as opposed to, we're against Wall Street. Because, who can argue that the banks got bailed out? I've said all along that they should have been able to, under law, go and get those assets of those corporate leaders that tanked those companies, because their employees lost everything. So why should the CEO of Bear Stearns, who tanked his company, still have $300 million? Other than that was the law at the time. And that was government policy that allowed them to do that. And we could go and we'd spend half an hour talking about the government policies that led to that. They didn't do anything illegal. It was morally wrong and morally repugnant. But what we should be is, what's the positive? Where does that protest go? What do we want to have that's a positive step forward? If you're just against something, and I pointed this out to a friend of mine, I said, in 1968, who won the presidential election? Hubert Humphrey or Richard Nixon? And the protests that were in Chicago, the violent protests in Chicago, sent a message to the average American voter out there that lives in Indiana, that lives in New Mexico, that lives in Maine, that lives in Southern California, lives in Florida, Oregon, that, gee, we want to vote for somebody that's got stability and some control, because we don't want anarchy. We want liberty, we want freedom within the rule of law. And the Occupy Wall Street movement, in my opinion, needs to develop a positive message. Otherwise, you run the risk of turning into a 1968 type of a situation. And I know many people who are watching this right now might not like that outcome, and I can understand that. With that, that's this one Republican's position on that. I want to thank you for watching the Republican Hour. We will be back on the first Sunday of the month in November. So have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Does this sound fill you with excitement? Ready for a first responder career? Then check out the Delaware Academy of Public Safety and